Messenger with the Grief and Potluck podcast. That was a fun song by a Tony Venturini. You can find him on Bandcamp called Mr. Monkey Man. Yep, it's a kooky song, but I figured we're in 2021. Could be a kooky year. Why not get it started? I'm being kooky as it is. I'm wearing a fun hat. Look at my cute little fascinator. Good times had by all, aren't they? Well, I don't want to bore you with my beautiful self. Let's get started. Let's get this party started. Yeah. 2021, shaping up to be a monster of a year. Don't be frightened. We're here. Grief and Potluck Podcast. I need my own jingle, maybe. Who knows? There is a light. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. There is a light. I don't know why I'm singing, but boy, am I in a mood today. Have you stepped out in nature lately? Have you gone for a walk? Despite, I don't care what people say. Yeah. Thank you for stopping by and listening to the Grief and Potluck podcast. We're going to get started with a little bit of fashion. No, I'm not going to do a fashion show, but I will do a fashion video. Just not this time. It will be coming soon because we're going to talk about the colors of mourning. Black and white are commonly found across various cultures when it comes to the colors of mourning. Green, not so much. But historically speaking, we can step back in time with mourning traditions, and that is spelled M-O-U-R-N. I-N-G. Mourning. M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G. We're mourning the morning. Oh, I digress. The color black has long been associated with funerals and the practice of mourning loved ones. Western mourning traditions began when early Christians adapted pagan practices into religious funeral rites. Black clothing was originally worn to hide the living from the dead. Can you imagine? Funeral rites have grown more elaborate since the Renaissance period and were indicative of wealth and affluence. At the beginning of the 19th century, a new feeling of romanticism regarding death became prevalent. When Prince Albert of Britain died in 1861, women of all classes followed the example set by Queen Victoria, who plunged into deep mourning for her husband. So, she went deep into this mourning period. There had been strict social rules developed outlining the exact color, fabrics, and length of time to be used in mourning. Ladies' fashion magazines helped this information by publishing fashion plates and articles on mourning etiquette. The demand for mourning wear and accessories grew so high during this time that mourning warehouses were established to sell ready-made items. Women who could not afford these clothes would chemically dye their own clothes black at home. The Victorians, we have to thank them a little bit, created a bit of cult around mourning, continuing up until World War I, where new roles for women emerged, gradually erasing all these elaborate mourning rituals. People still continue to wear black and dark colors for funerals, and the etiquette in general had become completely impractical the way they put it out there. So, required stages of grieving, isolation, those were becoming a thing of the past. By the 20s, people were able to wear black clothing regularly without the association of mourning. Yay, black clothing. So helpful in the slimming effects. Well, in general, during this Victorian era, thanks to their maddening cult rituals, there was deep mourning, full mourning, second mourning, half mourning, lots of stages, as you can see. In deep mourning, women wore dull black made from certain fabrics, such as crepe, wool, or broadcloth. Widows literally spent a whole year and a day, in this stuff. Grieving mothers accessorized with white to reflect that it was their children they were mourning and the purity of their children. So we go from deep mourning to second mourning, which allowed some non-black trim, a few variations and accessories, and that was 9 months, approximately, for widows. Women grieving for a sibling spent 6 months in this fact, and half mournings. Okay, so we've moved from deep to second to half, are much more relaxed than the previous. Women could include colors such as gray, lavender, or mauve, and include subtle patterns. And finally, this lasted 6 months, approximately, for a widow. Now, everybody in the family was expected to mourn. So, children had to do it, men had to do it. Men, however, got away with wearing a black armband or a hat band, and children under 12 wore black, or they wore white with black sash or trimmings. Women were held responsible for representing the family's wealth, respectability, etc. So they were more stuck in this mourning look. So if you're mourning your parents around 1868, 1871, you are wearing full black, silk moire, mourning dress. There is a luster to the dress that makes it seem inappropriate for mourning, but moire, M-O-I-R-E, I'm probably saying that wrong, was a fabric that you definitely utilized in that time. Let's see, M-O-I-R-E. How does this sound?
Moire.
Okay, so simple as that. No more need to spin on it. So it's very glossy, shiny fabric. Now, in second mourning, women, as we said, were allowed to decorate dresses with some beading and other details. So, in beading, could be a bit stylized, but still conservative. And of course, the beading was done in black. So, there's no just running away with it. Now, in half mourning, which is the final stage, women were now allowed to technically get out of the black and into some color. As we stated earlier, shades of gray, some purple, a bit of mauve, and I think lavender was pretty popular, as we saw in if you're a fan, Downton Abbey, as Cousin Violet always wore lavender, purple, dare we say, violet colors. So the dress would have some frou-frou. So you get some ruffles, you could get some bunching, you could have white buttons, you know, taffeta. Taffeta was allowed at that point. So accessories also come into play, but we're going to get into that shortly. But what we wear is important, I think, in regards to how we represent, how we represent ourselves at a funeral. So, as they say, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. Officially. So, granted, if you do not have a black dress, but let's say you have a black and white dress, that's appropriate. Let's say you don't have black, black and white, but you do have a darker color. Very appropriate. What's not appropriate is if you saw my loud fashion funeral video, low cut, crazy bright colors are just not gonna cut it. It's just trying to stand out. It's too showy, mind you. If you're the mob boss and it's your mistress, whatever. She's gonna wear what she's gonna wear. But on the whole, essentially, it is a period of mourning. It is a time of sadness, and you don't want your clothes to reflect or scream, "Pay attention to me!" Pretty much. So, subdued colors, and I promise you, if you have, you're going to find something in your wardrobe. You just will. There's not something in your wardrobe that you can't get away with. Just try not to make it so skin tight that you can't breathe. Try not to make it so low cut that everybody's looking at your boobies. Because you don't want to bend over and pick up your purse. And then, whoopsie doopsie. That said, you don't want to wear a big old freaking hat. Unless you're in Britain and it's appropriate and there's gray. Because it's morning. And gray is a morning color. Just saying. But, nonetheless, I don't have a pink dress to wear with it. Nor should I. I would hopefully have a gray dress and go forward. But if I have neither, why am I wearing the hat? But yeah, your goal, and that's the word I think it's going to use because that's what just came out my mouth. Your goal when you're going to a funeral is to be there to support those that are grieving, to show you are there with those who have lost someone because you probably know that person that they lost. That might have been a family member, it might have been a dear friend of theirs, but you might have known them. If you didn't know them, then you're there to support the person who is doing the grieving the most. You're there to support the person who has lost this loved one and who is just beside themselves in the general scope of grief. You're right. It's hard to figure out what to say to people during this time. So that's going to be something I think I'll look into for us. Let's see. What to say. What to say to the grieving. Now, there's no perfect formula. There just never is. But again, your goal is to show you're there because you care. Your goal is to share that you were there in solidarity with those who are grieving. Your purpose, maybe you're a really good friend, maybe you're a coworker, is just to show visually by being there that you do care, because sometimes that means a lot to people. We don't understand it always. Sometimes we just can't. Until we're on the other side of it, we just can't understand it all the time. But sometimes maybe you went to the deli, picked up some chicken for them. Maybe you brought something to them at work. You know, perhaps you don't know what their dietary restrictions are, so you just give them, say, a grocery gift card as I know this could be a tough time. Here's something to help you pick up an easy meal. Because sometimes people don't even want to cook. They're so weighed down. They're tired. They're exhausted. If they haven't had an opportunity to sleep, if they haven't had an opportunity to breathe, and that's where you come in. It's pretty much, I know I'm going to get some flack for this probably, but I'm going to say it's a lot like being a bridesmaid at a wedding for the bride. Your job as a bridesmaid is to help the bride. You make sure to corral the parents. You make sure that the ushers get their boutonnieres going, and you make sure that everybody's seated so that when it's time to go, you'd be like, okay, everybody's in the church now. It's time to go. We're good to go. You're kind of the eyes and the ears, as it were, to assist that person, to help them get through this hard time. And yeah, you may not be that person who's the bridesmaid, as it were, who's right there, right next to them right now. You might be that person who's there for them in a couple weeks. Because the person who might actually be right there by their side, well, they could be family from out of town. Well, once family from out of town leaves, then what? Then they need you. Your coworker, you're a friend, you're a neighbor down the street. Your job is to help. You're there to show you care. So even the simplest things, I promise you, this is going to sound crazy, but it works. Even if you take them a package of paper cups and paper plates, the decent ones, not the cheap ones, mind you. Okay? We're just saying. Because paper cups and paper plates and paper towels, and even possibly, I know it's a tough one to do for this time of the world, but toilet paper. I know. It sounds disgusting, but I promise you, it's not going to go to them used. It's going to go to them wrapped up in a nice wrap. Like it got out of the grocery store, into your buggy, into the checkout line, into your car, and into their hands. So, packaged products in the paper realm are going to be a help, a huge help, because there's a situation called people coming by. People coming by after the funeral, people coming by later on. There's also a thing called potluck. I know. If you've never heard of it, yeah, it's the best thing ever. What happens is if you are not faith-based or faith-based, depending if you're in the South, people will bring you a tray of food, Corningware of food, a hot, delicious bowl of something. And that something needs to eventually be scooped out of their own container and put into another container so that you can store it in your fridge. And that container, the one that held the hot stuff, gets washed and sent back to its original owner. Yes, it seems like work, but this is where your friends come in because they're going to help you keep a list of who brought what. So you get the right dish back to the right person. Now, the very discerning Southerner has stickers on the bottoms of their dishes. I know, seems silly, but it's just fact. Fact is, people put stuff there. So, not only are you there to show that you care and that you're not there to scream out the scene by what you're wearing, you're there to show solidarity with those grieving. You're there to support them, even if it's helping them wipe off the table because now they're tired, they've entertained, they've hosted, however you want to call it, people after the funeral at their house. Food's been put away, but there's still some crumbs left on the table. Take a paper towel, take a washcloth, wipe that table off, wipe the countertops off, offer them a beverage, and then just say, okay, I'm down the street. I'll check on you tomorrow and actually check on them the next day. Give them time to be alone. You don't have to sit there all the time, be there all the time, what have you. But give them a moment. Let them be by themselves. It will happen eventually. Just breathe. This gives you time. You go home. You collect yourself. You hang up your mourning outfit that you wore to the funeral. Maybe you have to put it in the laundry because, like me, you probably spilled something on yourself. I mean, it's a thing. I don't know why I manage it, but I do. And the next day, you go check on them. And again, this can depend on your relationship, but don't assume because you're not their best friend or because you're not family that you don't need to be involved. It really wouldn't matter to me if my neighbor took a moment and said, how are things? I mean, that to me would be lovely. And if my neighbor took a moment and said, um, yesterday was trash day and I noticed you didn't get your garbage can down to the road. Is there a garbage, do you need me to help you haul it off somewhere? Do you need me to put some of your garbage in my can because now your trash is overflowing because the funeral was 2 days ago and now you've just got trash because, it's paper goods that people have thrown away and now there's just a ton of trash left over. Just stuff. Silly stuff. Down to mowing the yard maybe. I mean, if you've got a yard person and they're not that expensive and once in a while because now they're a widower or a widow and they're elderly, they may need help just mowing the yard. They may not be able to do it. They may not know somebody reliable. So, give them a treat. Get their yard mowed and tell them, hey, this is my yard person. And going forward, if you want to use them, give them a call. This was who cut your yard. So it's as simple as small gestures. They don't have to cost you an arm and a leg. It's just simple. Even a card. It's simple. It's something. It shows you care. If that's how you can show you care, show it. It's okay. Don't be embarrassed if you're literally showing up with a package of Solo cups and a package of toilet paper. Hopefully it's 2-ply. Just saying. It's not embarrassing. Things are going to be needed. They just may not have the strength or the energy to get out to the store. Because unless you've experienced grief yourself, it's hard to fathom until it's there. And it comes in various waves. It comes at various times. And it comes to all of us differently. As I've stated before, grief is different for everybody. Some people, it's going to keep them in bed a couple days. Some people, it's going to weigh them down. They're not going to feel like they can do much. Some people, it's going to feel like they have to do every single thing and they won't sleep. And so eventually they're going to crash and then they're going to need some help. So there's going to be different times at different aspects that you're going to be there for someone who is grieving. Because at some point, we all go through it. Sometimes it's just not the elderly that deal with it. It could be any age at any point. We're going to deal with grief. So, that said, 2 things to take away, as we stated. Don't outshine the funeral. You're not there to make a show. You are there for the grieving. Do what you can to help, because your goal at the end of it is to just be helpful. Showing up, helpful. Coworker who reaches out within a week, helpful. Friends, neighbors, family. Taking a meal, making sure the table's wiped off, making sure there's toilet paper, because you don't want to run out of that. You're good to go. These are things, simple as they are, show that you are there for the grieving. So whether you're in mourning or it is mourning, be there for those people. Because at one point or another, you too will need those people to be there for you. All right. This has been an episode, I believe we're on 3, in 2021 of Grief and Potluck. However, if you haven't checked out the website, www.celebrationsoflifemagazine.com, please do so. Please check us out. Thank you so much. Enjoy One More Round by Tony Venturini, to be found on Bandcamp.